I don't know what to think about these situations, but there was 2 different occurrences that happened to me when I was a little younger. It was just a normal sleepover with my cousin Georgia. We were chilling in a room on our phones until we heard her on the window. We were definitely a little scared, but after a few moments we looked out of the window and nothing was there. It was not a tree, nor was it an animal. It was really late at night and we were able to stay up since it was a summer break. Even though we were a little scared, we just started over and maybe it was just nothing. So we went back to watching TV and chilling. At this time, Georgia went to go use the bathroom and I was waiting for her to come back, and that's when I heard the... And a minute later, my cousin walks right back into the room and I told her about the tapping, and we looked outside of the window again. Nothing was there. Now, you might be listening to the story and thinking like, hey, it could have been anybody playing a prank. But I assure you that that's not the case, because it's impossible for that to happen. And the reason why it might be that way is because my bedroom is on the 2nd floor. The other time when me and my cousin was around 4 or 5, her mother, our grandmother, and a few of her siblings, along with myself and her, went to our great-grandmother's grave a few months after she passed away. Her gravesite was close to the woods near the cemetery. It took around 2 hours to get there. When we got there, her siblings, herself, and I got the choice to stay in the car or either get out. One of her siblings, along with herself and I, chosen to get out of the car. Once we had gotten out, we had to walk to our great-grandmother's grave, which took around 3 to 4 minutes. Once we all got there, she remembered saying she'd seen a pentagram on a tree. She didn't tell her mother due to the fact that she didn't know what a pentagram was, nor what it meant. After being there for about 20 to 30 minutes, we heard a loud roaring noise coming from the woods. We had all booked it back to the car, and I remember her tripping on the rock, and it was a good thing that she caught herself before falling, or else she would be toast. Once we all had gotten back home, she said that she remembered her mom telling her dad that she got scratched by something and she didn't know what it was. They lifted up her shirt and she had 3 deep scratch marks over her back. There was nothing there that could have scratched her, so we don't know where it came from. This whole ordeal scared the hell out of us, and ever since then, we have only went to the cemetery once. My mother is a very religious person and she didn't believe in the paranormal. But I think after that experience, it had changed her beliefs a little bit. The following is a retelling of one of my long-term friends' experiences growing up. I will be sharing it as if I were him. I was 6 years old when I moved from the country to the big city in South Australia. I was 6 years old, and I was already used to moving and never felt like any place was home. You see, we have been moving from place to place in attempts to flee from my biological father, who, let's just say, was not a good person. All I knew about it at the time was that he was a very bad man, and that I needed to protect my mom, but she did all of the protecting, of course. However, this time would be different. This was the first time that we would live in a house that we would call ours, and a house we could stay in for a long time due to the fact that the reason for our moving was now coming to an end. This was a government-provided house that only ever had one other renter and was fairly new, with a large backyard and plenty of space for a young boy to play without driving his mother crazy. Now I'll share the layout of the house so it may help with visualizing future events. The house was laid out as an up-down L shape with the entry door at the bottom, leading into a large living room which continued into a large kitchen. From the kitchen, you would go into an upside-down L-shaped hallway. The left of the hallway was the bathroom and laundry with the toilet at the center of the L. To the right, the hallway continued down to 3 rooms, 2 small on the left and 1 master bedroom on the very end of the hallway. So if you stood at the entry of the hallway, you would have no visual of the hallway leading to the rooms, only the doors leading to the bathroom, laundry, and toilet. Now the right side of the house was all windows that followed the L shape all around. The windows looked out into the fenced-off courtyard that wrapped around the house to a massive backyard. The first day we moved in, I was so excited. I got to pick which room I wanted. I chose the one that was closest to the bathroom, and we also went bed shopping. I believe it was the first bed I ever had, apart from a baby cot. I only chose the bunk bed that had the top bunk with shelves at the bottom. I absolutely loved it. My mom made sure to wrap the railings with donut covers so I had no chance of falling in the middle of the night, which I thought was silly because obviously I'm a big boy and I wouldn't be so silly as to fall. I came to really appreciate that barrier in the coming days and years, however. First night, I slept like a baby. No issues and no unusual things happened. I was so happy that I had my own room and my own bed that I just felt content. The second night is when the first incident occurred. Before I continue, a bit of backstory that I was very much unaware of at the time. However, my mom was really aware of. Just 2 weeks prior to us moving in, there was a death on the property. A man in his mid-30s was stabbed and killed in a hallway right on the corner as it turns into the bedroom hallway. As it was told to me many years later, this man was an abusive boyfriend of a single mother. During his last session of yelling and hitting the mother, her son, who was 8 years old at the time, heard his mother's cries of pain as she was being beaten and decided that he needed to protect her. So he grabbed a knife from the kitchen and he walked into the hallway and pushed it into the boyfriend's back. He seemed to have hit something pretty vital as the boyfriend was declared dead when the paramedics arrived. Given the trauma, the government moved them out of the house to somewhere with more support and proceeded to clean up the mess for the next person in need. Now, back to the second night. I awoke suddenly, not knowing why, but I figured my mom just came in to check on me as I felt someone was at the entry of my room. I pulled myself up from the railings and popped my head over to look down into my room. What I saw would change me forever and form a memory I would never forget. I'm currently in my mid-30s and I can still see it in my mind as if it were yesterday. There, entering my room, was a man, but at the same time, it also wasn't. I say that because I could see right through him. I felt my body go cold and clammy. I was terrified, but also I was not believing what I was seeing. I quickly sunk back into the bed and hid behind the donut cover barrier my mom had made for me. I began pinching myself to wake up, scratching and even punching, but I was still here. I had to have been mistaken. I was definitely awake, but I must have missed Saul. I pulled myself up to the railing one more time and slowly peeked my head over. He was still there. But he was looking up this time. He was looking at me. That moment felt like an eternity. I took everything about this man, his clothes, his hair, his movements. It was insane. I must have been going insane. He wore a puffy Letterman jacket that I'd only seen in old TV shows like Happy Days, jeans and sneakers, which had a logo but I couldn't make it out. His hair was short and wavy as if it was picking up a breeze. His face was not old but not young. It was younger than my mom, I thought. What made me know that he wasn't a real man was something that I've never seen in a ghost video, movie, or publication to this day. He was 100% transparent, but every crease, every detail, every feature was outlined and highlighted in this luminous green. It's really hard to explain, but maybe try to think of a statue of a person. Only the lines are visible, but everything in between is transparent. The detail was so vivid. I could see the pupils of his eyes staring right back at me, yet I could also see right through them. Once I was no longer frozen in fear, I quickly sank back down and hid again. I started punching and pinching myself more and more as I started to cry. This went on for what felt like 20 minutes. Once I had stopped crying, I once lifted my head up and peeked over the railing again. It didn't last long as I could see clear as day. He was still there. This time, deeper into my room and looking around the back corner for some reason. This was the final time I looked. I ended up pinching and punching myself and crying myself to sleep. The following morning when I got out for breakfast, I told my mom everything. Now, if she was shook, she didn't show it at all. She told me not to worry and that it was just a reflection through the windows from the road. And of course, my 6-year-old brain somehow believed this. Somehow a reflection through a wooden fence across a 7-meter courtyard through closed curtains into my room seemed totally viable. I sometimes think it was just my brain being handed a coping mechanism and lashing on. But that was the first and last time that I saw the man. However, it would not be the last time that he would show it he was still around, or the only entity that would show itself to us. Around 1 month after the first incident, my mom was hanging clothes up on a line outside in the backyard while I played with my action figures in the dirt. I realized that I needed my big spider toy to keep my action figure scene going. Gambit and Rogue had just fought off a robot T-Rex and now they had to fight off a big giant spider. So I asked my mom if she had seen my spider and she said it should be in my room, probably in my toy box. At this point in time, I had pushed the first incident out of my head and was living a carefree, blissful life as a kid. But that day will be a reminder that things weren't right in that house. I got up and out of the dirt and brushed myself off best as I could, as my mom didn't like to get dirt in the house. I then went through the laundry back door, past the toilet, and entered the hallway, but that's as far as I got. I didn't even know what happened to me at that time, as I never felt anything like that before. My later teenage years will make me acquainted with the feelings quite well, as it felt like I was being punched in my gut. The force took any air I had in me and I fell to my knees and immediately started vomiting. I remember I was in a lot of pain, and I also was vomiting my breakfast, and as a kid, that is the most traumatic. I naturally started crying and calling for my mom, who came running inside. She picked me up and took me to the bathroom to clean up while she was asking what happened. I told her that I didn't know and that my stomach started to hurt, and then I started vomiting. She looked really concerned, but after 5 minutes of monitoring me, I seemed to bounce back as if nothing ever happened. All I wanted to do was get my spider and continue playing to cheer myself up. So that's what I just did. My mom cleaned up the vomit and I played in the dirt once more, just hungrier than the last time I was there. Until I felt that sensation later in life, I had no idea what happened to me that day. I thought it was normal to just get a stomach pain and then vomit so suddenly. And how a child's mind justifies things will always amaze me. Over the next few years, we started to have more weird stuff happen, more and more. Very cliche things now that I think back. Taps would turn on without anyone being near. Doors would slam shut and open randomly, and knocks would be heard coming from unoccupied parts of the house. My mom thought it was me for a long time until she watched the tap in the bathroom slowly turn on by itself in front of her. She would even tell my grandmother about all the strange stuff after this. My grandmother didn't really believe her, of course, until she also had the similar tap situation turn on by itself. She even told me in my adult years of an experience she had, which I'll touch on briefly as it's still an occurrence in the house. My great-grandmother had died recently and she had very bad arthritis in her hands and gave a very distinct touch, and I had bad asthma. Now both are important to this brief edition. One night my mom was awoken by hands pulling her wrists up and out of bed. In her groggy state, she felt her grandmother's hands. Without even questioning it, she knew the touch and feeling of her hands. Upon waking up completely, she was filled with a chill and fear as to what just happened. She had been pulled enough that she was halfway out of the bed and touching the floor. Pulling herself together, she got up and went to the bathroom and checked in on me. As she passed my room, she noticed something was off right away, as of instance, as if she could not see me due to my bunk bed donor barrier. She rushed to me and climbed up to my bed to see that in fact I was not okay. I had stopped breathing. I just had an asthma attack and had not been able to catch my breath. My mom literally grabbed me right away and began to do chest compressions and mouth to mouth. Thankfully, as you can tell, I survived. So that's a story my mom has shared a few times about how my great-grandmother saved my life. But anyway, let's continue. Now, none of these little things really bothered me, as I was a kid off in my own little world, as kids should be, but not for long. I would once be again pulled into a nighttime terror that would affect me deeply. This time, I was not alone. It was about 4 years living into that house. We had gotten used to the odd things and it really didn't bother us anymore. But this night was different. And this night would yet again be a night that I would never forget, as it was a moment of pure fear for the safety of my mom. I was awoken by a blood-curdling scream, a scream of pure fear that I have not heard since. It was my mom. She was screaming as if she was being murdered. I was frozen in fear. I felt helpless and alone. The sound of the person who protected me and loved me was screaming in fear, and I could not even move. As suddenly as she started, she stopped, and then there was complete silence. Somehow the silence was even worse. It was unknown, a fear if my mom was dead or alive. What had caused her to scream like that? What should I do now? I mustered up all the courage that I had within me, and with a very weak voice I said, "Mom?" She replied, "I'm okay." Relief washed over me, but the terror remained. What had happened? And that scream was not a scream that anyone would be able to fake. It was pure and guttural. My mom came to my room and reassured me that everything was okay, that I should go back to sleep and she would talk to me in the morning. I found it very hard to return back to sleep, and I think it was the same for her too. In the morning, she told me exactly what happened over breakfast. As a then 10-year-old, it was probably still not the best to share, but she did keep her promise. She had woken up suddenly as she had done all of those years ago. Looking around to see what had woken her up, she saw a man standing at the foot of her bed just staring at her. And this is when she screamed with fear, as I'm sure after the turmoil of the earlier years I mentioned at the start, having a man at the foot of her bed was probably one of the worst case scenarios for her. I had told her that I got my small baseball bat and was coming to her room when I called out her name. But I think she knew I was lying to seem tough, but she didn't correct me. She began to describe the man as an old tall man with a long white beard and crooked teeth. She said he was a solid figure unlike what I've seen, and the reason she knew he was not a real man is when he started to dematerialize in front of her eyes. She talked as if it was nothing to worry about and she was not afraid, but I can tell you that this was not like the other things that happened here. This had her shook. Then a few months later, we moved out to another government-provided house. I have no idea what she told the housing department to convince them that we needed a different place, but it happened very quickly. Good evening, everyone. This is Yuri K, and this is the end of the video. Please leave a comment and let us know your opinions on the matter. If you happen to like this content, please check out our other videos. Make sure you like and share amongst your friends and family to help our community grow. You happen to be new to this channel? Please make sure you subscribe. It's free and you can always change it in the future. You have some terrifying story suggestions? If so, make sure that you send it to my email, fearofthedarkstories@gmail.com, and I'll feature it in a future segment. But you guys stay safe out there, and remember to always be afraid of the dark.